Hello, all. Welcome to another episode of AWS Show and Tell. I am Anil Nadiminti, your host today, and joining with us is Amit Arora. Nice to meet you, Amit.
Nice to meet you, Anil. Happy to be
Hey,
here.
yeah, thanks. So, for everyone who's joining here today, we're going to be diving into this concept of MCP registries and AI registries and why we need them. But before we get into the details, let us know where you're joining from. Again, a quick introduction about myself is that I'm Anil Nadiminti. I'm a senior solutions architect here at AWS, working with enterprise customers in the fintech space, supporting Web3 customers here, and I'm joining from New Jersey today. And that's about me. Amit, how about you?
Hey, hi everyone. My name is Amit Arora. I'm a principal solutions architect for AI/ML and generative AI at AWS. And usually I would have said I am joining you from Maryland, but today I am in the Bay Area, so I'm joining you from the West Coast.
So how's the weather on the other side, right? So
Much better than DC and the Northeast, yes.
yeah, okay, excellent, right? So yeah, I think it was a little bit I think maybe a stormy weather yesterday evening on this side, but glad you're having some time with the is it like a customer engagement, I guess, right? So that's kind of why you're
Yes,
flying in.
yes,
Excellent.
yes.
So this is so we're today going to be talking about the MCP registers and why we need them, right? So maybe just a quick intro is as we all started getting into this this vibe coding mode, or being able to create these agentic AI applications that interact with internal applications. These apps are interacting with MCP servers, and as we start adding more and more MCP servers, or even so we see that the tools are going to increase. The MCP servers connect the agents to the tools, and agents are also going to be using skills, which is now widely adopted open source concept that's out there. But we need security, guardrails, governance, and most importantly, a place for discovery of all of these MCP tools, servers that we need to use for the enterprise and for individual use as well, right? So Amit Arora has created an open source solution and has made it available to the open source community under Apache license. We'll talk more about that. But this open source solution has been getting over a lot, over 500 stars in GitHub. So we'll be sharing more links there. But let's dive into the details and unlock and get more insights into this. Right. So Amit, uh, what do you have to say here?
Yeah. So as MCP and agents and skills gain more and more traction, now as large enterprises adopt these, we are faced with the usual sort of thing about well governance and security, as you highlighted, and then also this idea of how are these AI assets, as I would call them, discovered. So I'm going to
Mhm.
share my screen right here, and we'll show you this solution called AI Gateway and Registry. Now, it came about over the last, I would say, 9 months or 9, 10 months or so, where as enterprises were adding these MCP servers, it was like, the usual problem that I need a central place like a catalog for discovering governed assets that are available to me as an AI developer from my organization, or also uh, assets that are available to AI agents themselves to dynamically at runtime discover. So we needed some sort of a catalog, i.e., we needed a registry. So if you were having this conversation in, let's say, March of 2025, this would have been a MCP gateway and registry, which is how this solution started about 9, 10 months ago.
Mhm.
As time progressed, we figured out, well, not it's not just about MCP, but A2A came along, and we said, well, we also need a way for agents to find each other, not just for agents to find tools. So we added support for agents or A2A agents into this registry. And then fast forward 2, 3 months ago, skills became a thing, and we said, well, agents need to discover skills as well. Developers need to discover skills. So it became a skills registry as well. So now we view this solution that you have on your screen right now as a AI registry or a control plane for all of your AI assets, where, let's say, individual line of businesses or central IT teams can make these assets available by registering them, and we'll have a demo and walkthrough of that by registering these assets and make these available to AI agents, to coding assistants, to AI agent developers, and everybody can access them in a secure and governed way. And there are several nuances that go into that, but that is the idea here.
Excellent, right? So again, you started building this. It has gotten a lot of traction in the open source community. We have a lot of deployments, and talking about deployments, these deployments seem to be production deployments that are out there, right? So can you talk about that as well?
Yes. So when we started building this, the idea was, I certainly started building these as something that I could build and deploy on EC2. And then we said,
Hmm.
well, we need a more sort of an enterprise ready type of thing. So we did two more deployment modes. So one is, if you are in the AWS stack and want a serverless type of solution, then we have support for deploying this on Amazon ECS. And we, as part of this repository, provide Terraform scripts to deploy this on Amazon ECS, which means that you can deploy this in a region, and we will deploy tasks for this solution in multiple AZs and deploy a load balancer in front of it with CloudFront, so and all the good stuff. So you would basically get an enterprise grade application deployed on AWS. Now, if you want to deploy it, the other option, as actually most of the customers now deploy it, is on Kubernetes. So we
Hmm.
also added Helm charts to the solution, which means that you can then deploy it on EKS, which is how most customers have it deployed today. So multiple options available. Both infrastructure and code options available for Amazon ECS for serverless, Amazon EKS for Kubernetes-based deployment, and for local development, you can deploy it on EC2. And interestingly, if you just want to play around with it on your laptop, we very recently added a Claude skill to this, so that you can ask Claude to, hey, here is a skill, and deploy it on my MacBook. So you could have this solution up and running on your MacBook in 15 minutes and not even have to clone the repository. The Claude skill will do all of that for you. So multiple deployment options that are available for customers to try this out.
Excellent, right? So we have multiple deployment paths where you can run this tool anywhere. Again, looking at your console here, you're showing us MCP servers, A2A servers. I can see
Yeah.
virtual MCP servers, agent skills, a lot of these that are available to be hosted on this platform, right? So and can you talk about the license as well, Amit? Like, as we just unpack this.
Yes. Certainly. So this is, let me actually, go to the GitHub repository. So this is the GitHub repository for this. Let me make it slightly
Right, I
bigger.
put that in the chat here
Okay.
for everyone who's watching.
Excellent. Thanks, Anil. So this is available under the Apache 2.0 license. So you can use this. And this is the GitHub repository that you can see. So we have about 500 or so, give or take, stars, and close to about 50 contributors that have contributed to this. And happy to say that these are lots of AWS folks plus folks outside of the community. If you and this is a truly community project. So if you look at the pull request list, you will see people submitting pull requests for features that they requested, or bugs that they found, or new enhancements that they would like us to have. So the entire roadmap for this solution is public. Not only the code and design is public, but the roadmap is public. So you can see, what we are working on over the next few weeks. Let me fix this link over here, right? So over the next few weeks, what are the features that we are working on? You can explore those, provide us feature requests, look at the issue list, pull request, etc. that are there.
Excellent, right? So maybe I think this is a great point. Maybe let's have a tour of this dashboard that you're showing us. What's available through the dashboard, and how can you use it, right? So maybe let's start there.
Yeah. So what you have on your screen is my local deployment of this solution. And again, this works the exact same way if you have it deployed on EKS or ECS. So we have this as an AI gateway and a registry. So what you are seeing here is a bunch of MCP servers that are registered with it. So the flow here is that, let's say maybe I can have a GitOps pipeline, or manually, through this register server button, register MCP servers that are of interest to me. Now these could be the MCP servers that individual line of businesses, developers build within an organization.
Mhm.
These could also be third-party MCP servers. I would also add these could be AgentCore Gateway, right? So Amazon Bedrock AgentCore Gateway, which is a streamable HTTP MCP endpoint. You could register that over here. You could register agents deployed on AgentCore runtime. So all of that. So let's take a quick tour of this, and then we can also see how to register individual MCP server. Let's me just expand something over here. So these are MCP servers that are available over here. And notice that I'm logged in as a particular user. Now, this user happens to be an administrator, and I'll go into those details in a bit. Because this user happens to be an administrator, so you see some control functions over there, like I can delete this MCP server, I can edit things about this MCP server, and I can enable, disable this MCP server or run health checks. But if I was logged in as a different user, now these functionalities would not be there. I would simply be able to view and discover this MCP server, but not, run CRUD operations on it, if you will.
So if you're talking about an enterprise environment, so maybe an admin would set it up, and then the
That's right.
individual builders would then be subscribing to this registry, and then the admin has some control on what's available, what's not available.
That's exactly right. And when we say an admin would set it up, they could certainly do that by interacting it from the UI. But also, we see a lot of customers integrating this solution as part of their GitOps pipeline. So this registry is built on top of an API, and I'll cover that in a bit.
Mhm.
Basically, you could add those register server or update server style, or agents for that matter, API into your GitOps pipeline. So let's say I build an MCP server, and when my pull request, let's say, gets merged to deploy that into production, that one part of that pipeline is to register that MCP server with let's say this registry, right? So it could be a manual process, and it could be automation as well. But let me just make one more comment here, that once the server is registered, you are able to see a server card like this. So for example, this Cloudflare documentation MCP server, pretty popular server over
Mhm.
here. The server itself is hosted on this endpoint, and I can register it, and I can, as part of that registration, I can configure authentication schemes if that server requires, and I can assign tags and so on and so forth. I can edit this also when done. Now, once that is done, I can see, well, if I am a human user and I'm interacting with this registry, I'd say, well, what tools does this provide me? So I can, click on that, and I can see here are the tools. Here is the schema that exists for these tools, and now I am sort of ready to use the server or this tool as part of my AI agent.
Mhm.
Uh, we can assign Yelp style ratings to individual servers. And so as more and more people use it, the idea is that it would get more ratings, and these ratings then bubble up that server as part of the search, which we'll see. We run periodic health checks to those servers, so you can see that here. Since I'm an admin, I can run health check on demand. I can enable or disable these MCP servers, so that, let's say, just for a regular function, a server is registered, but vulnerability is found, or for whatever reason I need to disable or delete that server, I can just come here and just disable that. And now when search requests are run, they would not yield that server. I can know about server versions and so on and so forth. So that's a quick tour of a server card, and we have similar ones for agent. But Anil, I think I interrupted you. So if you have a question, go ahead, and then we can talk further.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, like in an enterprise environment, you mentioned about the star rating, right? So this is still within the concept of an enterprise that you can deploy and make it available to the internal users. But as an individual, somebody could also install this in their laptop, in an EC2, on whatever projects they're working on, and still make this gateway as an interface to the MCP servers. Is that
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that is right. I mean, you could use it at an enterprise level. You could have multiple installations of this solution in an enterprise and have them talk to each other, or you can use it at an individual level and say, hey, this is sort of my personal installation of this registry, and all my access to MCP servers goes to this registry and this gateway, which we will talk about in a bit, and that then provides me a central point of providing governance even for my own, let's say, use cases. So yeah, that's exactly
Right.
right.
And one more follow-up question I have is you took one of the MCP servers. It did not have some kind of authentication, but you added authentication, right? Is what I saw when you shared that, Cloudflare documentation.
Yeah, yeah. So Cloudflare documentation. Now there could be different types of MCP servers. Some MCP servers are public MCP server, like the
Hmm.
Cloudflare documentation or the AWS knowledge base server, which are basically is now a way for new way for agents to consume documentation related information. So instead of having like a public web page, or I should say, in addition to having a public web page, organizations now routinely publish MCP servers, documentation related MCP servers, which are public and do not require any authentication.
Hmm.
Now, having said that, there are, of course, going to be MCP servers which do require authentication. So Cloudflare, incidentally, publishes another MCP server, which is the Cloudflare API MCP server,
Hmm.
and it requires bearer authentication bearer token. So while registering, and we can go through the registry flow, we can specify. So if I click over here, we can specify that, hey, this particular server uses a bearer token, and provide what is that bearer token. So I can provide that over here, and that would be used by this registry to run health checks against that server. And the auth scheme could be bearer token or API key. So for example, if I click on Context 7, which is another popular public MCP server. So Context 7 follows an API key, and so you can select API key over here. You can provide what your API key is, and you can even say, well, typically servers may not say API key is just a header field called API key. Like in case of Context 7, it says Context 7 underscore API key. So you can specify that also, which
Hmm.
would allow us to talk to Context 7 using a auth header that it supports. So yeah, all three options: no authentication, API key, or bearer token based authentication.
Right. So we have questions coming in the chat about fine-grained access control, but we'll
Yeah.
get there in a second because we want to see. I think you're already showing us the cards, but how do we register an MCP server and then how
Yeah.
do we get started? Maybe we'll go through that flow.
Let's do that. So I go here and I click on the register button. Now this is a UI flow, of course, but this exact flow is available programmatically as well, and we'll
Hmm.
talk about that. So I can register an MCP server or an A2A agent, and I can fill in these fields, and those MCP servers, when I fill in that field, the MCP server will get registered over here. Or ultimately, we follow a JSON schema. That JSON schema, for think of it as a server card or
Hmm.
a A2A agent card, right? You can simply upload the file if you have that. You can handcraft that file and upload it here, or you can just fill in these forms or programmatically, and that's how these server get registered. And while doing that, notice the backend authentication. Here is where we specify the auth scheme for the first time. I mean, there are some other nuances to this. Sometimes some MCP server have a custom endpoint, like, some servers support /MCP, some don't like it. So if you want to
Hmm.
override that, there are provisions over here. You can specify tags while registering an MCP server, or if you want to specify a complete JSON dictionary as a metadata, right?
Hmm.
So while doing the search, and I guess the next thing that we want to talk about is a semantic search that we provide over here. So you can specify a metadata, and this metadata gets factored in while doing the hybrid search. So we'll find servers or agents or skills for you based on their descriptions and tool descriptions and skill descriptions. But also, if you specify tags like this, or if you specify a complete custom metadata dictionary like we have over here, which sort of says, hey, what is my cost center, who's the owner, what is the team, etc., things that are more complex than tags but require some sort of structure, we factor all those in while doing the search.
Yeah, I see that most of the MCP registries that we go to, they specify official, right? It's still like an
Yeah.
official tag, but I think we are going more fine grained than that by
Yeah.
giving like a JSON which is more granular.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so that, and then let's do a search here. So for example, let me just make this slightly bigger. Let me do a search here which says coding assistants, right? So let's say I'm a user and I want to find out, hey, what coding assistant MCP servers have been provided to me by my organization. Now it could be, now I'm not sure I'm looking for MCP servers, or I'm looking for agents, or I'm looking for skills. So this search over here will search through all of those. So for example, it bubbles up this idea that, hey, there is a EXA server, it's a very popular server. It has a 94% match, and I can, click on this, and it gives me the details about what this server is and tells me also a relevance score. So I
So
can
when
see this. Yeah, go
so
ahead,
when you're
please.
doing this search, is it like a semantic search that you're doing, a hybrid search, like where we are doing the
Yes.
right?
Yeah, exactly right. So it is a semantic search plus rather, I wanted to say it's a hybrid search, which includes semantic search, but also lexical matching of the keywords and tags and that JSON metadata. So it matches all of those things. And there is a algorithm we use about how much weightage to provide to semantic versus keyword, etc. And all of that is sort of documented in the design. But yes, it is a combination of those. So, looking at this, when I looked up coding assistant, it found these MCP server also provides me a relevance score. So it tells me like, XI is more relevant than context 7, sure. And then it also finds me the matching skills, right? I mean, it finds me agents also, but in this case, the agents are not relevant, so they have low matching score. But interestingly, it also finds me matching skills, and we can talk about skills in a second. So it says, hey, I have this PR review skill, or an MCP builder skill, or a documentation skill, which might be relevant. And if I click on this, I'll be able to see the entire skill that I can just copy paste or download or view the skill on GitHub, wherever that skill is hosted. So it will provide me a link to the skill.markdown file. And now I have multiple ways of consuming the skill, either copy paste or download, or just add this link, this GitHub link into my AI agent, and it can then, at runtime download this.
Or if the agent is already able to access the gateway, it can already go to the skill and automatically pull the skill and probably include that in its
Yeah,
workflow.
something like that, right? Basically, bottom line is, as long as it has network connectivity to wherever that link takes it, it can just use it directly. Yeah, exactly.
So then let's talk about access controls. Like how does somebody access this? I know you have federation baked into this. So let's talk a little bit on that.
Yeah. So access control is a pretty deep topic, and let's see how much we cover here. So
Yeah.
let's try. So as I mentioned, the first part is I'm logged in here through an admin persona, but if I log in through a different persona, I will not see this entire list of servers. Basically, we have this concept of actually, let me back up a little bit also. So we integrate with multiple identity providers. So typically enterprises have identities for their users or agents, workload identities inside whichever identity provider they use, be it Amazon Cognito or Okta or Microsoft Entra or Keycloak, or there are so many of those. So what we do is that we can create what we call groups, or identity provider also call them groups, and we then say, well, this user is a part of that group, or this machine-to-machine identity is a part of that group, and the definition of that group, which is, I'll show you how we define that. The definition of that group says, hey, this includes access to this server and those tools and that agent and those skills, etc. So we are able to define that over here, and I'll show you momentarily how that works. Once that is done, so now if that user is going to log in, they are only going to see a smaller set, a subset of this list. They are only going to see servers and skills and agents that are a part of that group, and nothing else. So whether they log in through the UI, or whether an agent does a search and the agent now is a part of a group which only allows it access to, let's say, 2 servers and 1 agent and so on, its search space will be limited to that. So that is how fine-grained access control is implemented. And the additional sort of nuance over there is that the registry itself has a bunch of APIs. Now, whether or not you can call that API is also part of that group. So, there is access control at a registry API level. There is access control or fine-grained access control at a MCP server level, at a agent level as well.
Right. So that answers the question that was asked in the YouTube
Okay.
chat. So about fine-grained access controls.
Okay, so there's a whole bunch of things that we can cover over here, and I'll try to give a quick overview. So we talked about MCP servers, but just like MCP servers, you can register A2A agents also over here. Now these agents could be running on AgentCore runtime. These agents could be running on EKS clusters, or these could be third-party agents. As long as you have an agent card, just like we saw in the register server, where the A2A agent card, as long as you have that, you can register the agent over here. And again, same deal. You can have tags for this. You can provide ratings. You can enable, disable them, run health checks, etc. And based on that, based on your access control, fine-grained access control, which groups you are a part of, that agent will or will not show up in search or show up on the UI. That happens over here. There is one very important part actually that I want to sort of go through, which I think Anil you mentioned at the start, which is about security scans or security in general of these AI assets. So one thing that we are all super careful about, like, hey, we want to be very cognizant of the security profile or vulnerabilities, that when I'm onboarding a MCP server, or when I'm onboarding an A2A agent, or skill for that matter, how secure is it? Now that not just applies to third party resources that I may be onboarding, but also things that are being built in house. So what we have done as part of this registry is that we have included an integration with Cisco AI Defense, their open source scanners specifically, the Cisco AI Defense MCP scanner, agent scanner, and skill scanner. So every time you register an agent or a skill or a MCP server, we will run a scan for that and provide you a vulnerability report. So for example, you see this green shield icon over here. That
Right.
means this server scan passed. And if you see let's look at this one, red shield. So it means it found a security issue. So when I click on this, it says, hey, this server is potentially unsafe. I found these, two vulnerabilities. It runs the scanning through the Yara tool set. This is an open source tool set. You can also use LLM based scanning, and basically use LLMs based on hosted on Bedrock, or you can use the Cisco proprietary scanners as well. But we've integrated the open source one. So it says, I think there are potential prompt injection attack, and so that could, when this server is registered, it will get registered in a disabled state. Or if you are using this API in a GitOps pipeline for registration, you can look at the output and say, yep, I think there are some vulnerabilities here. I'm not going to register it, or I'm going to register it in a disabled state. And a platform admin can then decide that, okay, I looked at these scans, and yeah, there are vulnerabilities, but I want to override them. So I want to go and manually enable that. So you, as a platform admin, would then get the control. And if you want to see sort of more details, like a CVE type of information, that is also included over here. And then these things are stored as well. So you could then have downstream integration with some ticketing system, and you can drive workflows from there, and you can sort of periodically scan these servers anytime. We provide APIs to periodically scan the entire registry, if you will, right? So the idea is that some of our customers do that is, hey, I'm going to run a nightly scan of the entire registry, so that MCP servers could change, or agents could change. So I want to keep running these scans, so that I am aware of the security profile of my AI assets all the time.
And recently, when we've seen that when OpenClaw was there, and then we saw Moltbook, and then one of the first things that was uncovered is that there's a vulnerability in the skills that these agents are
Yeah,
running. Right, so it's great to see that this is baked into the open source solution here, and
yeah,
that
yeah.
you can run the skill on demand, scan on demand.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And the good part also is that the same sort of scanning applies to all three types of AI assets that are there. And maybe in future there are more assets. We'll add more scanners over there. But that sort of gives you the first line of defense right on the supply chain side. Hey, I am very cognizant of what I'm onboarding onto my platform.
Especially governance teams and security teams will be very pleased to see this here. So now, what about the other vectors? Like again, we have A2A. Does that cover that, the security cover? The posture cover those as well, because now we're dealing with outside party agents.
Yeah,
Is
yeah.
that
Yeah, exactly. So the A2A scanners work exactly the same way, and we provide some documentation inside the GitHub repository as to what these scans look like, how can you run them, but exactly same. The same sort of scanning profile is available for all three types of assets.
So now that you've shared a high level, are you able to bring like an architecture of this? If you have one, or maybe we'll wait for you to pull that up. Like something where you can show us like how this is built, right?
Yeah. So we can have that architecture discussion sort of in two ways. One is like a block diagram level, what services, etc. What do I think? How is this deployed? And the other is basically the technical stack of this.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the technical stack in terms of the data store, we use MongoDB on the open source if you want to deploy it on EKS,
Mhm.
and we use Amazon Document DB and Amazon ECS if you want to deploy on serverless managed service. This is a completely Python-based application with the UI built in React. And We haven't talked much about the gateway, which we can talk about in a bit. But the gateway is a Nginx reverse proxy. And let me actually, speaking of architecture, all the architecture is described here. So if you go to the docs folder, go to design. So you'll find all sorts of architectural detail about different things. So these are pretty detailed, and we can go through that. But all the architectural details are here. But at the heart of it, it is basically a Nginx application with a reverse proxy, and the registry is a fast API application, and the data store is either Mongo or DocumentDB. And then there is the deployment aspect of it. Actually, there is a architecture diagram which might be pretty relevant. Let me.
Right. I see that in the homepage as the README file. So
Yeah, that also. Um,
scroll down. Yeah.
Yeah, that also, and there is another one. I mean, that are architecture diagram. Sorry, there's a lot of scrolling. By the way, this wanted to provide a separate tour of whatever is the latest and greatest. But
Mhm.
what I wanted to refer to, yeah, right here. Let's see. Okay, I can make this bigger. Right. So that this is actually a pretty low level detailed diagram that what I was just describing, that at the heart of it there is a reverse proxy built with Nginx, and you can have your AI agents which can talk to MCP servers over SSE or streamable HTTP, and the MCP servers themselves could be hosted wherever, and then those MCP servers talk to backend systems which could be database systems or API systems or whatever they happen to be. So that's the architecture here. I want to bring up one more diagram as it pertains to architecture. Bear with me for a second.
And while you're bringing this up again, maybe something on the compliance lines, right? So we have again compliance teams who are interested to understand how the compliance is set up. So thanks for bringing this the diagram here on how this is deployed at ECS.
Yeah. So this diagram shows an ECS deployment, but the EKS deployment is sort of pretty much similar. The idea here is that this is a region-based deployment, gets deployed in a private VPC and front-ended with a load balancer, and that load balancer then provides you access to the backend tasks that are running, the registries task, the built-in auth server task, and the solution comes packaged with Keycloak as an open source identity provider. So if you're not
Mhm.
using an existing one, you can use the one that is baked in into this, but you can replace Keycloak. Let's say all customers that we have today are using an existing IDP. Like identity is something that they already have now, whether it is Cognito or Entra or Okta or something else. Basically, this would get replaced by that particular task, and the auth server will be configured to talk to that existing IDP. And then here is your document DB or MongoDB, and logs in CloudWatch, and secrets and secrets manager. So all the good stuff about around secret management and KMS encryption and rotation of secrets and all of that taken care of. And because this is a multi-AZ deployment, so if you deploy this on ECS, so out of the box you get HA, and then similarly if you are deploying it on EKS, so if depending upon how your cluster is set up, you will get HA over there as well.
Right. So yeah, this is great. Now going back to your console screen again, can you show us how the compliance teams can get visibility into who's
Yeah.
doing what, right? So maybe
Yeah, certainly. So this icon over here, which is the gears setting icon, and again, I am able to access this because I'm logged in as an admin persona. Now, if you are a user of this registry, you won't even see this icon. So here we maintain a set of audit logs, so you can see that I can check who accessed the registry API or who accessed MCP servers through the gateway. So I can see all the different users over here, and this is the registry API access. So if I click on this, so we store the access log in a very structured format where you can see, we redact all the, sensitive material, but who accessed from what IP address, what was the response time, what was the status code, etc. All of this information is stored inside your data store, DocumentDB or MongoDB, and you can, configure a TTL for that. So for compliance purposes, this sort of information becomes really handy, and then you can export this out. You can export this as JSON or CSV. And similarly, if you wanted to see an MCP access, who accessed which MCP servers. So for example, this identity, accessed resource templates list method. And, if this was a tools call, you would see that also. And then, all this information, which group were they a part of, and so on and so forth.
So does it mean that if an agent is also accessing the MCP server, we'll be able to track all the
That's precisely, yes. Thank you for mentioning that. That's precisely it. This identity here, which says user, actually, could be a human user identity or could be a workload identity as well. And that's precisely the point of, putting that over here, that for compliance team, they have audit logs and they can use this information to figure out, piece through even agent to tools interactions or search, who looked up what search, etc. is available over here.
So essentially what you're saying is every API call, every MCP tool invocation, and who's doing what, whether it's a human user, whether it's an agentic application, everything can be, everything is visible in this dashboard.
That's exactly right, and you can configure rotation for this as to how long you want to keep these logs. But yes, that's all available here.
Great. Now, also going back into, do you want to share anything here on this settings?
Yeah, yes. Quickly, I wanted to show a pretty important concept over here. So as we started developing this registry, one of the things that we heard from most of our customers and almost all the customers at this point is, well, we don't think that there would be a single registry within the organization, which means individual line of businesses might want to maintain their own registry, but me as a central IT team want to have visibility. So we don't basically want to have a shadow IT where I don't know what agents or what MCP servers are running in line of business 1 versus 2 versus 3. So what you can do here is that each individual line of business or whatever grouping entity makes sense for you can have an individual deployment of this registry, and then a central registry could add those individual registries as peers, right? So what you see on your screen here as federation peers. So this is a different endpoint than this registry, right? But now, and let me just add here just to show, I can add line of business 1 registry. I can configure what endpoint they are available at, and I can, configure a static token for accessing those registries. And I can say, well, what do I want to import from that registry? Do I want to import all public items, like everything? Do I want to, specific allow listed items? Do I want to filter by tags, which means, hey, only import agents or servers by certain tags, or just import everything? And so we can do that, and we will be able to import those assets from here and see in this registry what the entire organization has, and I can configure sync intervals to say, hey, periodically just refresh that data every so often. So going back to my screen over here. Yeah, go ahead, Anil.
So essentially what you're saying is we have federated access where line of business can, or different domain units can have their own separate internal MCP registries, maybe different installations, which they
Yep,
have more
yep,
control, and then the
that's
central team could have like an overlooking MCP, like a
that's
pass-through
that's
MCP.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying, right? So that way you don't slow down the individual line of businesses which want to, onboard certain servers. And since the governance and scanning piece is built into it, you can say, well, that is safe. And then the central IT team, they could raise a ticket or, have some Git-based procedure to register that with the central IT team, and that will show up here. So, for example, you see this federated registry, and you say, hey, we have 4 servers imported from here, and I can, run a, on-demand resync also if I wanted. And well, now I suddenly found out that I have 5 servers. Maybe there is some
Mhm.
extra server that got added to that registry since we, last refreshed.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And
Now, one of the questions that we have in the chat is that can we block tools that an MCP provides, right? So again, we might have multiple tools. Can we only make certain tools available?
that is a interesting, question. So one way you can do that today is find and access control. So actually, let me show that. That's actually a pretty interesting question. So here, so if I go to IAM and groups, so these are groups that are created. So let me click on this, for example. So let's say this is a public MCP users group. Now, what does this group have access to? So I can say, hey, I have access to these servers. I can select
Mhm.
one. So for example, this context server. And now I have said that I have access to all tools. Let's say I didn't want you to have access to all tools. I could select which tools do I want to have you access to for whatever reason. Either, there is some malicious tool, or I just don't want you to have access to query docs, right? So something like, so I could do that. Now when, and I can just go ahead and save this. So now when, yep. So now when a agent or a user who is a part of the public MCP server groups accesses that, they would, out of the context 7, they would only have access to the query docs thing. They won't have access to the other tools that this provides. And if they were to access that, they would get a access denied 403 error. The discovery won't show them these tools to begin with, but somehow, let's say, they try to access that tool, they would get blocked at the gateway level if they are using the gateway piece of this functionality.
Thanks. I think that answers that question. But as we look at this also brings us into another segment, which is you have virtual MCP servers in there up in the top, Amit. So how does that work, right? So maybe let's unpack that.
Yeah. So virtual MCP servers are very interesting concept. So this came about again as a some requirement from a customer, and they said, well, look, if I go back to the screen for a second, they said, we have these many MCP servers now. Consider a typical enterprise scenario. I have like 100 MCP servers over there. It becomes overwhelming for a particular user, or maybe the user itself says, I only need these 10 MCP servers and these, whatever 30 tools. Now, instead of wanting to add those 10 MCP servers to my AI agent, or let's say if this is a coding assistant style use case, so go
Hmm.
back here, they could say, look, I only want to access these servers and these tools, but I want to access them through a single endpoint. Right. So this dev essential server, for example, is a virtual MCP server. What it does is it provides me access to 6 different tools. There are 2 tools from Cloudflare. There is one tool from Current Time Server. There is one tool from Exa, one tool or 2 tools from AWS KB. So there are these 6 tools available to me. These are across different MCP servers. But now, to my coding assistant or to my AI agent, I no longer need to add those 3 or 4 different servers and bloat the context window by saying, well, because I added these 4 servers, and now you have access to 40 tools. You can create a virtual endpoint, virtual MCP server, and select and say, well, this server and those tools, and now get a single endpoint. So for example, if I click this, if I wanted to add this virtual MCP server, I have, let me make this slightly bigger, I would just add this one endpoint to my coding assistant or to my AI agent, and by virtue of adding this one virtual MCP server, it would have access to all the 6 tools. So I don't have to add, 4 different servers. I can just add one server and get access to the tools that we need. And that is a virtual MCP server. I'll point out over here is that the server is virtual, which means that there is no physical MCP server called Dev Essentials that requires compute that is actually running anywhere, right? So there is no additional compute for that. So the Nginx reverse proxy inside the gateway that takes care of routing uh, individual tool requests to the correct MCP server. So in that sense, you get a best of both worlds by having a single endpoint, which allows you access to multiple servers, etc. Except that there isn't really a compute which says, oh, I now have to add additional resources to run this virtual server.
This is great, right? So because initially when I was playing with the database MCP servers, like being able to only do read-only operations was not available,
Yes,
and it provided read and write, and the agent would start writing to the database. So now by doing this and going through this approach, we could only have read-only MCP server, or maybe all that are relevant to our context. And you hit
that's
that
exactly
correctly
right.
because we don't want to bloat the context. We want to keep the context, accurate as possible to our use case, so that we have
Yeah.
less hallucinations.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And just as you were saying that, it occurred to me based on what you were saying that, like to the previous question, one way of not exposing all tools for a single server, and you could create a virtual server which only has access to the servers and tools that you want. So the group-based way, the IAM group-based way, was one way, but you could also create
Mhm.
a virtual MCP server with like a platform admin could create that and say, hey, here you go. This is the one server that you have, so it has access to the read-only type tools that you were just mentioning. So that's another thing that you could use.
This is great, right? So that and now let's go into some more details here. Uh, uh, when we deploy enterprise grade applications, we want to also make sure that there is some kind of a DR. So can we deploy this solution in like multi-account, I mean multi-region deployments, or how do we uh, work around that?
Yeah, so the HA functionality is built into that, but for the DR functionality, I think it's pretty standard that customers would do typically is to deploy it in two different region and front end that with a load balancer or a cloud front, and do a DR that way. So we don't provide that out of the box, but again, that is standard as you would do for any other deployment on AWS.
Sure. Yeah, so then we've covered some of these. Going back to the external registries,
Yeah.
right? So that's a very important concept. Can you interesting concept? Can you speak about that?
Yeah. So on the external registries point, one thing, so there are two types of sort of registry federations that are possible. One is this registry and internal peers, the line of business use case that we talked about. Now another situation over here is that there isn't like one registry, there are different registry vendors. So for example, Anthropic runs a public registry. Now you may say that for my organization, I like these 20 servers that are available in Anthropic out of the 10,000, and I don't want to, have my developers or agents or coding assistants, now have connectivity to the Anthropic registry, or for that matter, any other external registry,
Mhm.
right? So you can build, you can import those servers here. So we provide an integration to certain external registries. So Anthropic is one, Workday is another one, and we are adding integration to other registries as well, which means that this registry becomes your single pane of glass, becomes the central control plane through which you could talk to other external registries as well, and not import everything. You could just say, well, these are the things that I'm interested in that external registry, and they would show up over here. So when I do a search, so like earlier, when I did a search for coding assistant, you saw that the EXA servers popped up over there. Now, the EXA servers are imported here from the Anthropic registry, but from a search perspective, from a tool scanning perspective, or ratings, or everything else, they are identical to something that you would, register with this solution. So this way, you have a registry federation where you can have the central registry, and it can talk to these other registries, import assets from there, and provide a central sort of a unified picture of all your AI assets, including third-party assets that may be having discovered from external registries.
This is good to have that integration with a registry, right? So it's like one of the members is saying registry, but we also have a bunch of questions coming in the chat, Amit. So maybe let me go through
Yeah,
some of.
yeah, yeah,
So
absolutely.
does this support open telemetry?
Oh yeah, glad that you pointed out. we do support open telemetry. So the metrics about the registry, and we haven't talked about the gateway piece of it, where you can access these individual servers and add them to your coding assistant, etc. But basically, we monitor those metrics, and those metrics are available through open telemetry. And what we do is we have a built-in integration with Prometheus and Grafana, and for the AWS ECS deployment, we run Amazon Managed Prometheus and Amazon Managed Grafana, and you can have your dashboard for these metrics over there. And you could also say, I have my own telemetry solution, and I want to visualize these metrics over there. So we had a customer who wanted to see these metrics on Datadog. So we recently just implemented an enhancement where you can configure a OTLP collector, and that OTLP collector could be running wherever, and you could have the visualization of these metrics over there. Let me just quickly show you how the built-in Grafana looks like, just to have a vision of that.
Right. As you're pulling this up, I think one of the just touching on one question is, are logs compliant with OCSF?
I would have to check that, and you can actually, try this out by installing it on your MacBook and see what the audit logs look like. I would have to check that, but we did try to follow standards-based structured format. So I'll take that as an action item to find out.
Sure. Yeah, so then maybe come back to the GitHub report to see more on that. I know we are getting close to the end of the hour, but still a couple more questions, right? So let's look at this Grafana dashboard that you have, and then maybe we should.
Right here. So so we can monitor like who accessed how many tools, how many authentication failure, what are the popular MCP servers and tools, and we're adding more metrics to that, response time metrics, etc. And all of these metrics, you can then visualize it in your observability solutions of choice, because hey, just configure an OTel collector and that's that. But we are adding more solutions to this, more metrics to this.
Yeah, and another question that's coming up is how does the tool, does it handle the token refresh, right? So
that's a good question. By the way, any question that we are not able to get through today, you can just most likely assume that it is included in this docs folder. There are like a bunch of markdown files, and specifically that tool question. Anil, I don't know how many questions how many questions are pending and how much time we have, but it is answered in these auth management and auth.md file. So the short answer for that is that we allow you to pass end-to-end token that we will provide to your MCP server over there. So we don't handle token refresh problems. You can just pass the token yourself.
Right. So you need to handle the token refresh and then pass it on so that the MCP serves. I mean, this is an MCP registry, right? So it handles a registry part of it. So when you need to get the new token, you'll have to get the new
token. For while registering, when we provided the bearer token, whenever I was showing at the time of registration of the MCP server, we do provide an API so that once you have a new token and you want to provide that to the registry so that it can run updated health checks, you can do that. Like we have an API which will allow you to provide the refreshed token. Like we didn't want to get into the middle of refreshing tokens for different identities.
Right. Okay. So maybe a couple more questions, and I know, or maybe one last question will be very brief on this. Is how does this work with AgentCore? And again, the questions are like AgentCore. There is a registry of when you run queries, you have built-in commands for understanding what kind of agents are deployed in the AgentCore. How does it work there?
So I would point you to this AgentCore.markdown file, which provides like our integration with AgentCore. But the short of it is, so I'll point out two things basically. The short of it is that for us, any AI agent running on AgentCore runtime, or any MCP server running on AgentCore runtime, or any AgentCore gateway, you could register that with this registry following this exact same format, right? So AgentCore runtime provides the get agent card API. So for an agent running on AgentCore, you could call the get agent card API, and that would give you the A2A card, which you can then programmatically or manually use to register that agent with this registry. Similarly, you can configure the AgentCore endpoint, AgentCore gateway endpoint, and that would register the AgentCore gateway.
Sounds good. Thanks, Amit. I think we are at time, but this is great. You've actually shared a whole lot of content here today for our viewers. And more details about this is available in the description. So feel free to go into the description. So Amit, since we are at time, any maybe 30 seconds if you want to.
Well, this is a community-driven open source project. So my standing request, please start this GitHub repository if you find this useful. The easiest way to get started with this is to use the Claude skill over here and install it on your MacBook. And you can have a sort of a toy version up and running on your MacBook. And then we have the infrastructure as code for EKS and ECS deployment. So do try it out. Any issue you want to create, any feature request, create that issue over here. And we look forward to hearing from you.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. This is a comprehensive solution. Please feel to check it out. More in the description. But that's it from our side. See you again next time.
Thank you, Anil.